Hello and welcome to another episode of PodcastDX, the show that brings you interviews with people just like you, whose lives were forever changed by a medical diagnosis.
I'm Ron.
I'm Jean Marie.
And I'm Lita. Collectively, we're the hosts of PodcastDX. On today's show, we are thrilled to welcome back the author, the health advocate, the former psychotherapist and caregiver, and general all-around dynamo, Kitt O'Malley.
Oh, sorry, the one, the only, Kitt O'Malley.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Kitt.
Oh, thank you for having me. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, it's been a long time. The last we spoke, I think it was 2019, and that was prior to that little thing called COVID pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to get us up to date on what these last few years have been like for you?
You bet. Well, actually, a lot happened since COVID. My mom died just before the epidemic in January 2020.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Condolences.
Right. She had dementia, so it was actually a good thing. You know, it was her time. And then the pandemic hit right afterwards. But once we got vaccinated, once the vaccine was accessible, we pulled up roots, and there was nothing tying us to living in Southern California anymore, because it was my parents were the last family we had in Southern California. And we moved up to Central Oregon because of all our in-laws are in Oregon. And our son, we had him transfer from his community college into a school in Bend. So we live an hour apart, and he has his own apartment, and
Nice.
He's been living independently and going to college successfully, which is incredible, because I was just like, wow. I'm just so proud of him.
Excellent.
It's fantastic.
Fantastic.
And how is life in Oregon?
It's wonderful. It's beautiful. I mean, right now we're in fire season, which the whole West Coast is.
Right.
You know, when we lived in California, we had to deal with this too. So, unfortunately, the air is not healthy. And I'm an asthmatic, so that makes that difficult for me. But really, anybody shouldn't be breathing in air that has smoke.
No, right. They're saying that inhalation of the smoke is adding an extra 2,000 deaths a year in the United States.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
It's worse than smoking cigarettes. It's really bad.
Right. Tell me, was it difficult to receive care, especially mental health care, during the pandemic restrictions?
Well, for me, it wasn't. I mean, I was in a stable situation. I already had providers, so I was able to see them with masks on. And when I moved, I saw providers via telehealth. It was hard to get providers when I moved, because I moved to a rural area. And I was on Medicare, and it's hard sometimes to find psychiatrists who will accept Medicare.
Yeah.
So I sort of did my research and changed to an Advantage plan that providers liked up here. So I switched from a psychiatrist to a nurse practitioner when I came up here, because of that difficulty with psychiatrists not liking the Medicare reimbursement rates. So that was the only problem, was going from in-person masked with established providers in Southern California to telehealth, and having to switch to a nurse practitioner when I moved into a rural community. But at least I had the resource of telehealth, and I'm okay. I still do telehealth with them, and I'm okay with that. That works for me. It doesn't work for everybody. And actually, my nurse practitioner is great.
Good.
It's good.
Good to
So
hear.
it all worked out.
Good to hear.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, because moving can be extremely stressful.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Kitt, I love the image of the rock Karen on the cover of your book, and I know I've said that before, and I will say it again. And your book is Balancing Act, Writing Through a Bipolar Life. But what inspired you to write your blog and your book? And are we going to have a sequel or another book coming out soon?
Okay. Well, I'll start with the sequel. I have not written since I published the book. So, which is interesting. During the pandemic, I kind of cocooned and focused on family. And then when we moved, I've been very active in my local NAMI Central Oregon affiliate. And that actually is my passion, and telling my story isn't so much of my passion anymore.
Okay.
I mean, it it's sort of like, okay, I've told this already before. So I'm like ready to be more active in volunteering. But you never know. But what got me started on blogging actually was that I got triggered and became hypomanic when my father-in-law was basically near death because he had eaten some cheese that actually several people died from eating. I forgot what it was in the cheese, but there was he was traveling in Canada, and he was hospitalized, and they had to put him into a medical coma, and he had a stroke while he was in the medical coma. And so my husband and all his siblings were up in Canada, hospitals, and they had to transfer him from hospital to hospital because his needs were greater than the rural hospital that he originally was in. And the stress of it triggered hypomania and sort of stressed me out, because all of a sudden I realized, oh my gosh, this is the age that our parents are. Our parents are at the age where their life is, they're at the end of their life.
Yeah, right. And it's winding down. Yeah.
Right. And so what happened was, my way to cope with the stress and the hypomania was to write. And so I started to write the blog. And then over time, I just started to think, I wonder if there's a book in these blog posts. I wonder if I could put them together in a way that, kind of keeps them. Because I kind of felt like when you blog, you post something and then it's gone.
Okay.
So I just wanted to preserve it in some way. I have gotten some reviews that were like, it reads punchy. You know what I mean? It's not like a narrative.
Right.
But that's basically, it's more like a poetry chapbook.
Right.
Because it's like lots of little jabs.
Or a little anthology or something.
Right.
And that's a different type of writing. That's all.
Right. And that's how I write. So that's just... so I don't know whether I will write again. I did start at one point in time, just the outline of and characters for sort of a more of a memoir that goes back to my childhood rather than just the blog stuff. But I don't know that I will ever write that. So.
Okay.
So, again, with your book, Balancing Act, Writing Through a Bipolar Life, can you tell our audience about how common is bipolar disorder?
Yeah, sure. You bet. I actually researched this one, and its statistics vary quite a bit. Like in the UK, the NHS, the National Health Service, estimates 1 in 100, so that's 1%. NAMI in the United States, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, estimates 2.8% in the United States, and that of that 2.8%, they estimate that 83% is severe. So that's a pretty high percentage of the people diagnosed with bipolar have severe bipolar disorder. And I would be somebody who's considered severe bipolar disorder because I've been hospitalized and have been psychotic. The National Institute of Health in the United States has an even higher statistic, and they're the research-based, place. So they probably would be what you would consider the most accurate statistically, and they'd say 4.4% in the United States have bipolar disorder.
Okay. So somewhere between 2.8 and 4.4%.
Correct.
And what are the symptoms that are typically associated with bipolar disorder?
Okay. I should have actually printed that out rather than just go by memory.
That's okay.
So most people are familiar with what depression is. So bipolar used to be called manic depression. And manic depression, to me, descriptively gives you an idea of what bipolar disorder is. So I'm going to first describe depression because that's something people are more familiar with. So the depression would be not just feeling sad, but, having a despair that's deep enough that it interferes with your normal daily functioning and lasts more than 2 weeks. So it's a deep, deep despair. It could even involve not being able to get out of bed. Now, mania can involve euphoric feelings that are beyond normal happiness or glee or joy. It can involve speeding thoughts, risky behavior, hypersexuality, sort of like when you think of highs, it's higher than your normal highs. Right? So, and then hypomania is a mild mania. So mania is pretty debilitating and destructive. And hypomania is like a milder than mania. So that rather than, let's say, going out and spending all your money, or being promiscuous or doing something very harmful, maybe you're just thinking really fast and, like I was talking about, having to write because your thoughts are, something like that.
Okay. All right.
Or not able to sleep. That's another thing is, being so, you're having your thoughts so you're not able to sleep.
All right. Thank you.
Kitt, can you tell us what the different types of bipolar disorder are and describe them?
Sure. So there's bipolar 1, which has the full-blown depression and full-blown mania. And this is the most severe. There's bipolar 2, which has depression and hypomania, so not full-blown mania. And people with bipolar 2 would not be hospitalized because if it gets to be the severity of needing hospitalization, then it would be considered bipolar 1. And then there's cyclothymia, which is even milder than that, which means that somebody's highs and lows are simply, if you were to look at a chart and you'd see normal, cyclothymia is in between normal and bipolar 2.
Okay.
And then there's not otherwise specified or unspecified bipolar and related disorders, is what they call it now. And what that means is that you have some of the symptoms for bipolar, but don't fit all of the criteria.
Okay.
So that's it. Those are the 4.
Thank you.
Okay. And Kitt, why is bipolar disorder sometimes called the genius disease, or is it just because you are a genius?
I think that was the answer.
Okay.
Thank you. No. Well, actually, research shows that people with bipolar disorder are more likely to be above average intelligence and above average in creativity.
Okay, that's why. Okay. Thank you. And obviously you have met that.
You met that criteria.
Yes.
And I picture like Vincent van Gogh. I picture as, and I don't know if that's true or not, and I'm just saying that off the cuff.
But
right.
That's somebody that you picture.
Yes, who has like manic periods and depressive periods. And
right.
Yeah.
Or Winston Churchill. There's a lot of people. There's a huge let me see, Ray K. Redfield Jameson, I think that was her name, wrote some books did research on the connection between mood disorders and writers in particular.
Oh, okay.
And other creatives, but there's a huge crossover. And I think that when you are highly intelligent or creative, you might be more, I think there's a thing about having to be highly sensitive, that when you're highly sensitive, you might be more intelligent or creative, but you feel things more or perceive things more. And so you're more, this is just me talking. This is not anything scientific. Because you feel things more and perceive things more, you're more vulnerable.
Okay.
I can see that.
And that could affect your mood.
Exactly. That's kind of, there's obviously, I'm a big believer in gene. I love science. I love the whole thing about genetics and all that stuff. But we are a combination of nature and nurture, right?
Sure.
Genetics and our environment.
Sure.
Right. And Kitt, how have you and your healthcare team chosen to treat or mitigate your symptoms?
Well, I think for bipolar disorder, I've found that what is most helpful is medication. When I originally was diagnosed with depression when I was 18, I used only psychotherapy until I was 30. And then at 30, I started to use antidepressants and therapy. And then I wasn't diagnosed bipolar until I was 39.
Okay.
So I definitely believe that therapy is helpful. And I do also participate in therapy and use mindfulness techniques. And in the past have used writing as a technique to cope with bipolar disorder. And I should be exercising.
Shouldn't we all?
Yes.
So, right. But my mental illness is definitely one that is sort of traditionally known to be effectively treated with medication.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So, Kitt, this next question has to do with finding a balance. I mean, earlier you mentioned about your mom passing, and again, our condolences. And that your son has gone away to school. How has it been for you to find the balance, taking care of yourself while trying to be a caregiver for your mom before she passed, and as well as with your son?
Well, before my parents passed, actually both of my parents had dementia. One of the things that was helpful was that when we considered moving in with my parents and my sister and my son, both said no. My sister's like, no, that would not be good for you. So we sold our parents' house and used that in order to fund memory care, high quality memory care for our parents. So that was one way, is that we used resources that most people don't even have, right? Because assisted living in our country is not. We don't have public health. We don't have, actually, something that I believe very strongly in is that healthcare should be a right, including, support for caregivers, because that's something that, you can't work and be a caregiver, for example.
Right.
The other thing was I had support of my husband, and I guess that would be
Okay.
That would be it, and my sister, and then once it's wonderful because I don't have to balance it. I just have to balance my own health and make sure I don't overdo volunteering, for example.
All right.
Yeah.
So now it's time for you to balance, because you already did the balancing act as a caregiver. Right. I understand
and that can be
very
truly,
stressful.
Yeah, truly overwhelming.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. For anybody. Anybody.
Because it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it's very, very challenging. And Kitt, how you said that you now you're focusing on yourself, but how do you modify your daily activities to help manage your symptoms?
Well, actually, when I wrote my notes, the first thing I wrote is that my best way is that I'm lazy.
I don't know if you're. I don't think you're. I was gonna say I don't think we would call you lazy.
So what and then I wrote notes is that I spend time on the computer because I enjoy spending time on the computer or my phone or watching TV. I give myself grace. So I give I might set up to-do lists or tasks or something, but I'll switch the dates or I'll take off dates, in terms of when I expect them to be done. I will give myself grace about not doing chores or something. I rely on my husband a lot for support. We both are, I guess you would say, in retirement now. I mean, I'm on disability, but he isn't working currently, which is wonderful for me. But he considers it in between jobs because I don't know if he'll be retired forever. I don't know if he's a good retired person.
Yeah.
That's when you find a lot of volunteer work.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You think fishing will take up all your time, and it doesn't quite cut it.
Right. He does do a lot of that kind of stuff, though.
Okay. Oh, that's good.
And Kitt, do you use stress management techniques, or what have you found helps you deal with stressful situations?
Yeah, I actually, one of the things that I do to help me with sleep is I use the Calm app.
Okay.
And that has, sleep stories and soothing music and meditation on it. And so I'll use that when I go to sleep, wearing headphone or, like headset. And then in my therapy, I now started to do seeing a therapist who does EMDR and different meditation and relaxation techniques, which is wonderful. So we'll use, as needed, we'll use that. Sometimes I'll just do talk therapy, and other times I'll do, meditation, this guided visualization or something like that. And then, when I do get outside and exercise, that, especially walking in the woods, and I live in a wooded area, that helps. Being out in nature research has shown that it helps with mental health.
Yes, absolutely.
Sure. And yeah, the Pacific Northwest is absolutely gorgeous.
Great place to get out in nature, for sure.
In terms of stress management, I also plan when I know I'm going to be doing something that might be stressful, and I give myself time to prepare for it, like maybe time off and time to recover.
Okay.
So I might even put it in my calendar. So if I have like a full, let's say I'm going to need to be doing presentations or doing this, I know, okay, I'm going to need to kind of give myself a break to kind of relax. I don't like schedule something right afterwards.
Right.
And, you say no. If I'm feeling like, I had another podcast interview recently where I just didn't feel up for it because I was very depressed or not, just down, not a deep depression, not feeling up for it.
Right.
And I said, you know what, I'm going to have to reschedule this because I'm just not feeling up for it. So those are other ways in terms of stress management.
Kitt, what do you feel is the most misunderstood part or aspect of bipolar disorder?
I think that people think that people with bipolar disorder are dangerous, and we're not. So I'm not saying that if somebody, I guess, very, very rarely there might be somebody who might be in a manic state who could be acting out in a dangerous way, but I think that would be pretty rare, and that mental illness can be managed. It's manageable. So, and that it is responsive to medication. That said, I'm not saying everybody with bipolar disorder has an easy time of it, or, can easily be medicated. It's unfortunately right now, medication is a matter of trial and error to trying to find what's right for each individual. And some people, they just try trial and error and they haven't found, it's not, we need to find better treatments. So
earlier, you had mentioned that you had been diagnosed at age 18 with depression, but I think like 39, I believe, with bipolar disorder. Is there a certain age or age range or general timeline for somebody to be diagnosed with bipolar disorder?
Yeah, it's usually the first symptoms will show up between the ages of 12 and 24, so in the teens. And then they used to have a childhood bipolar disorder in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, and now they have another diagnosis for it, and I forget what it's called. That kind of is sort of a just all-encompassing diagnosis for people who seem to be having children. Seem to be having mood symptoms or behaviors. And then, so usually it would be in the teens. Now, for me, because I was able to, I wasn't even diagnosed bipolar, even though when I was given antidepressants, I had a manic psychotic episode, because they just thought that was what they call iatrogenic or caused by the medication.
Okay.
They didn't think that I actually had bipolar disorder, and they just watched, like, okay, well, if we switch her medication, let's see what happens. Nowadays, if that happens, it's considered a diagnostic criteria to show that somebody has bipolar disorder. That if you give them an antidepressant and they become bipolar, oh, what do you know? They have bipolar disorder.
Would they have to wait to age 18 to actually be diagnosed?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think that they diagnose adolescents. They just aren't as likely to diagnose younger children with it. But there was a time when psychiatrists considered diagnosing my son. Well, I had a psychiatrist. His first psychiatrist said some psychiatrists would see your son as bipolar when he was 5. But I see him as ADHD. So that the diagnostic criteria for young children has changed. And they have a new diagnostic criteria. But if a child but when my son was very young, even 6, he was given mood stabilizers to see if they would help. So, and he was, the anti-seizure medications.
And did that
Not
help?
by that. No. He also had migraines. So it was sort of like that's how you treat migraines too. So it was sort of like they tried different things at different times. No, it didn't help. He was helped mostly by the stimulants for the ADHD, and unfortunately, he wasn't able to get the adequate treatment for his migraines until he was an adult, in terms of what was considered appropriate medication for a child versus an adult.
So we're going to have to stop for a little bit because our ad is, now that we have discussed the basics, our listeners better understand this condition. To better serve our guests and listening audience, we now work as an affiliate with a major medical supply warehouse in the United States. You will find our affiliate links on our website. We aim to tailor specific medical supplies and equipment based on individual diagnoses to make it less stressful than looking through an entire catalog for what you might need. We are open to your suggestions and will adjust our offerings based on what you, our guests, and listeners find helpful.
But we can get back to our show. Kitt, what role does nutrition play in your life? And do you have to limit your intake of caffeine, for example?
Well, I definitely don't drink in the afternoon because that will interfere with my sleep. Drink caffeine. Because that will interfere with my sleep, and sleep is very important in any mental health issue. But bipolar disorder has been considered also a sleep disorder, because you need to get your sleep in order to maintain your health. So, and I just drink 2 cups of coffee, and usually they're half calf or something like that. So I do limit my caffeine. I make sure I just have a balanced diet. Right now, I'm on a weight loss regimen to counteract the weight gain side effect of my medications. So I'm seeing specialists for that and, tracking what I eat. And so far I've lost 25 pounds.
Excellent.
Wow.
Good
Congratulations.
Amazing.
That's a big step.
It is.
Yeah.
So what are some other less apparent parts of your life that have been affected by the bipolar disorder?
Yeah, well, I would say one of the things that's just I think this medication side effects, and this is something that antidepressants and mood stabilizers affect the libido. So your libido is less, and your responsiveness is less, and that's and also just controlling the illness, because part of the illness is that heightened responsiveness or heightened sexuality. My energy level is lower because part of my illness was that I was very high achiever. I still can achieve high, but still, and just the negative side effects of medications, like the one that I just mentioned, and also I'd mentioned weight gain. I went from being 135 pounds to getting up to 195 pounds, and that's just not acceptable. And so And it's hard. I've lost my weight a few different, like 2 times in the past before this time, and then gained it back. So, yeah.
Yeah,
So that would
be a challenge, right?
Yeah.
Right. And with everything opening up after the COVID pandemic has been put on a back burner by the government, what are you looking forward to doing in the next year or two?
Well, I just want to continue volunteering for NAMI Central Oregon and hopefully get their programs rolled out in person, because during COVID, a lot of support groups and such went online, and people are lonely and isolated and need support groups in person.
Okay.
That's fantastic.
Good goal.
And Kitt, what support have you personally received during your whole healthcare journey? And what role have your friends and family played?
Well, friends, when I was 18 and suicidal, a friend who's still a dear friend of mine, I called her and asked her to come over and be with me when I went to the resident assistant in the dorms, and said I need to see a really good psychologist as soon as possible because I was suicidal. So that friend, I still, in my mind, think saved my life just for being with me. And my friends, just that whole group of friends loved me unconditionally, and I still consider them friends. As far as family support, my parents, when I had that psychotic break when I was 30 due to antidepressant medications, my parents welcomed me home at 30 years old to recover, because it took a while. I couldn't even read. I was falling asleep trying to drive. There was, and they put me to work. So first they had me painting a room, and then they, and then I started running out of things to do. And as I got better, I was able to go to get a temp job, and then that turned into a full-time job, by that. And I started dating my husband, and I moved out after a couple of months, because, I was 31. And, but that was huge support. And of course, my husband is my rock.
Gotcha. Earlier, Kitt, you mentioned about your planner and leaving some space in there. How important is it to remain flexible when you're making plans or setting goals for yourself?
I think it's key to understand that you have symptoms, that you need to pay attention to how you're doing and take it into consideration. And I also think, in terms of setting goals, I think it's really important to take a look at and perhaps redefine what success is. My early life goals have changed completely from what my goals are now. And I've been able to look at my life and see, my purpose is to, that my life actually does have purpose. It might not have been what my goals were, but what I've found is that I have this purpose in helping others understand mental illness.
Excellent.
And that's growth. I mean, you have changed, and you have accepted the change, and you've grown
and helped others with their
during the way, right?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Doesn't get any better than that.
Nope.
What role has self-care played in your journey?
Well, I told you about me canceling that other podcast interview, and I think I may have even rescheduled this one.
You did, but that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, so that's the same
we do
thing.
Understand. Yes,
that's the same thing. You know what I mean? It's like, that's self-care. If you're not able to do it, I was going through a rough time, and if that's, and then, I actually considered taking public speaker out of all my descriptives of me on social media, because I'm like, well, I'm not really doing that so much anymore. I have this plethora of podcast interviews, and how many podcast interviews do I really need to do?
Yeah. You have to put yourself first.
Right. Well, I'm glad that you were able to reschedule with us. That made us very happy. Yes.
We always love talking with you. And it's exciting to hear what's happened over the past few years. Yeah. And Kitt, what advice do you have for someone who has recently been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, or someone whose friend or family member has recently received a diagnosis of bipolar disorder?
I would say that mental health recovery is a journey. It's not something that just happens overnight.
Okay.
And that it takes time to find the treatment regimen that is best.
Okay.
So those would be the two things that I would say.
That's
As far as family members diagnosed, I would say, educate yourself about bipolar disorder. Take care of yourself. You sort of remember something akin to the Serenity Prayer. There's things you can control and can't control, to know the difference, because if you cannot really control somebody who has a mental health disorder if they're not taking their meds and they're an adult. You can't make them take their meds unless it's so bad that they can be, have to be hospitalized or have to be committed, and that's pretty far gone. And I would, let people know that there are resources for family members out there and friends that there are support groups, like, for example, NAMI and other nonprofits have free support groups geared towards family members. And that can help them be with other people and know what it's like to love somebody with a mental health issue.
That's great. Yeah, we'll have a link for NAMI on our webpage for this episode as well.
Okay. And how can employers make the workplace more functional and supportive for employees that are living with bipolar disorder?
I saw a thing about employers helping employees recently, and
would it help if they had floating holiday pay that they could use to take?
That would be good. Yeah, I think it would be having mental health days for anybody.
Right.
But I think what I wrote was, don't take advantage of them.
Okay.
People with bipolar disorder can be hyper productive.
Okay.
And a lot of employers consider employees disposable and will just use them as workaholics until they're not able to, until they crash, and then they don't care. Okay, so I had an employer where an associate and I worked really long hours, and the law firm said, hey, you guys have the American Airlines flu. That was our client. So what you have to do is take a week off, and you're not allowed to do anything but rest. You can't think about work. You can't do anything about work. So what they did is this law firm did was it just said, you must go home.
I like that.
Because they knew that we were overworking.
I like that. I know that my daughter's job needs to do that.
Yeah, my poor sister. At the end of the month, every month, it's very stressful.
The mortgage company.
And then also every time they have her fire someone, I think she should be able to take a mental health day after that, because it's extraordinarily stressful. Yeah. Along that same vein, how can employers support employees who are also caregivers at home?
So here is something that I thought was interesting. I mean, definitely giving people, maybe here's my ambivalence here. I mean, you can offer things like on-site childcare or resources or whatever, but I ultimately believe that it's unrealistic for employers to give the amount of support that employees need to be caregivers. I think we need a nationalized healthcare and senior care, or just care, because it's a full-time job to take care of somebody who's not able to take care of themselves. Somebody's not able to work if they're a full-time caregiver of somebody who cannot take care of their basic needs.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, we look forward to your running for president and affecting these changes. We support you.
Because otherwise it's unfair to the employer. I mean, how can you expect employers to...
Right.
I mean, there are things employers can do to support their employees, but I think that the problem's bigger than that.
You're right. You're right. Well, Kitt, before we wrap up, could you tell us how we can learn more about you, social media-wise, and purchase your book, Balancing Act, Writing Through a Bipolar Life?
Well, I have a website, kittomalley.com. You could actually just put Kitt O'Malley in anything, KITTOMALLEY, and you'll find me all over social media. Okay. You can just put me in a search engine, you'd probably find me because I'm that all over social media.
All right.
And my book's on Amazon, but Amazon they send it all out all over the place. So I think you could purchase it places other than just Amazon too.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for your inspirational. And he's gonna. I just stepped on a little
No worries.
But thank you for your wonderful posts on social media.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been great catching up with you again. And as Jean was saying, you are an inspiration to all of us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And if you could hang on the line here while we finish up our show notes, thank you.
Yeah, and then I wanted to talk about one other thing. But if our listeners have any questions or comments related to today's show, they can contact Dominic and he will field them. Or you can contact us at PodcastDX@yahoo.com, through our website, PodcastDX.com, on Facebook, Pinterest, TikTok, YouTube, or Instagram.
And if you have a moment to spare, please give us a review wherever you get your podcast.
And as always, please keep in mind that this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice or mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or a mental health care provider or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or mental health condition or treatment, and before undertaking a new healthcare regime. And never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you've heard on this podcast.
Till next week.